In today's episode, I am going to be giving you 5 essential tips that is going to take your guitar playing to the next level. Now, whether you're a beginner or a more advanced player, you need to pay attention to this because these provide the building blocks that is going to turn you into an all-round awesome guitarist. And I tell you what, you stick around to the end of the video and I'm even going to throw in an extra tip just for you. Now, we're going to be talking about how to set up a guitar amplifier. I'm going to be giving you practice tips. We're going to be talking about picking technique. I'm even going to teach you how to maintain your equipment like a pro. But right now, we're going to start right back at the beginning and go back to basics. And we're going to learn how to hold the guitar properly.
No, definitely not. Oh, fuck. Yes!
Now, jokes aside, I want to talk about the fretting hand first and the importance of perfecting this technique. Now, this will not only improve the efficiency, but it will also improve your finger speed. Now, there are 2 main ways in which I like to teach this. The first I like to call the crab's claw. Notice you've got a kind of crab's claw shape with your hand. But my preferred method, I actually call the baguette technique. Now, bear with me here because I want you to imagine that you're holding the baguette like this and you're about to take a bite. Now, I want you to observe that position and maintain that shape. Now, we're going to take it behind the back of the guitar neck. We're going to come down underneath and then bring it up. So our thumb is touching the back of the neck and our fingers are hovering over the front. Let me just get rid of that. And don't worry, no baguettes were harmed during the making of this video or wasted because that's my lunch. So I want you to maintain this shape that we've got here and observe that kind of horseshoe, or imagine this is the baguette that you're holding, or the crab's claw, whichever works for you. And that is the position that I want you to try and maintain whilst playing. Now, this allows us to get nice and fingertippy with our fingers, which in turn gives us the ability to press down the notes nice and accurately and get a nice clear sound. Before I expand on this further and go into how to improve your finger speed, if you're a more advanced player, it is so easy to overlook this. And let's be honest, going back to basics is probably something that you don't do very often, but mastering this basic technique is something that I highly recommend, and it's the one thing that I regularly check in on myself. Now, I see it all the time with pupils that are, say, grade 3, grade 4, that really struggle to get to that next level. Now, it's only by taking them back to basics that they then realize that they were not playing the correct technique properly. And it's only by going over it that allows them to unlock the tools necessary to make them more efficient at playing and unlock faster finger speeds. Now, imagine you're lifting weights. When you get to the higher weights, the higher you go, the harder it gets to lift them, right? So if you start with the wrong technique, you're not maximizing the results. So it's really important that you start with the correct technique to maximize your results. Now we've gone over our fretted hand position, I want to talk about a second technique. And this is the concept of 1 finger per fret method. Now this is the art of using all 4 fingers to play notes on our fretboard. Now, arguably, this is my #1 most ranked, most important, and most vital technique that you should be learning right from the start. And the reason for that is we need multiple fingers in order to play things like chord shapes or improve our efficiency across the fretboard and our speed with our fingers. Now, let me put it another way. You don't choose to travel everywhere hopping on 1 leg. You use 2 legs, right? And that's because it's more efficient and much easier. The same concept applies here. I don't choose to use 1 finger because that's only using 25% of our potential. Now there's 25% in each finger, so we use 2 fingers, 50%, 3 fingers, 75%. We need to unlock 4 fingers right from the start and unlock 100% of our potential from the very start. Now, I have a fantastic finger exercise that really helps with this technique, and I highly recommend you go and check it out. Just click on the pop-out banner above here and it'll take you straight to it. Now, I recommend going through this 3 times per week to really master it. Now, one final note with this finger position is to really pay close attention to how far away they are hovering in front of the fretboard. You'll notice that they're quite close, ready to go. Now, I see it all the time with fingers that are way out here visiting the moon. You need to be really aware of this because you want your fingers close and ready to go, because it's so much more efficient pressing notes that are close to the fretboard and faster than it is with those fingers that are out here in space. Now, before I move on to give you my second essential tip, I wanted to talk about sitting and playing with your guitar. Now, I'm using my lovely Fender Strat to demonstrate this for reasons which I'll explain in a moment. But if you've got something like a Gibson Flying V, obviously you'll need to stand because the guitar slips down. But let's move on to the genius design of this guitar and reveal some of the hidden comfort secrets that you may not even have realized existed. Now, we're actually going to start with this lovely curve at the bottom here. And that's quite clearly designed so the guitar can comfortably sit on your lap. Now, if I take my hands away from the guitar, you can immediately see it's actually fairly well balanced. It's not headstock heavy where it's trying to pull down this way, and likewise it's not body heavy where it's trying to pull the neck up. It actually just comfortably sits in your lap, and it's actually really intuitive and comfy to play right from the start. Now, at the bottom here, you will also notice this curve here. Now, this is designed so obviously you can move your positions and play the higher notes up here really comfortably. And then it sort of counterbalances that with this second curve up here. Now, not only aesthetically does this look really pleasing, but I kind of do wonder if there's a balance thing going on with the sort of cutout and curve being further back here and this one being here, if that kind of acts as a weight thing. I'm not sure about that, but it's just a theory. And then on top of that, you can even use it as a handle to pick up your guitar. Now, we've also got a curve on the back of the guitar here. You'll see this sort of cutout bit here. Now, that allows your body position to lean right over the top and get a really good view of the fretboard and your picking hand. And then we've also got a curve, a slotted curve on the front of the body here. Now, that allows our picking hand arm to come and rest, and it means our picking hand is perfectly in position to strum the strings. And then finally, you'll notice that the input jack is on the front of the body here. Now, instead of being on the bottom like some other guitars like a Les Paul or something. Now, what that means is if you're sitting down on a chair or something here and you actually go to plug this in, you're not actually hitting the bottom of the chair with the guitar lead. So it's again really handy for those that are just sitting down and practicing. Let's talk standing up and playing. Now, obviously you'll need a guitar strap for this. One thing I find when I'm learning songs, I can often play them while I'm sitting down, no problem at all. Yet when I come to standing up and play them, it's not always the case. And quite often I have to practice them quite a bit more to be able to play them standing up. Now, if you've got a performance or you're gigging, you might want to consider trying this beforehand. I used to have my guitar strap considerably lower than this. I was trying to imitate Slash and be all cool, but it genuinely boggles my mind how that man has his guitar so low and at such an angle. But he's a very cool guy and it looks very cool, so fair play to him. Now, these days I have my guitar considerably higher. One of the main reasons for that is I've got psoriatic arthritis, so it's much more comfortable to play. But I'm one of these musicians that I just can't really sit still when I play. I kind of move with the music. So standing up and playing, it makes me feel a little bit freer, but I just kind of go off in my own tangent into my own zone, and I need to be moving to play that. So I find when I'm standing up, I have a bit more freedom to play. Now, I guess the moral of this story really is there's no right or wrong way for this. You have to experiment and find out what works for you and what fits your needs. Now, my very last point, it sounds so blatantly obvious, but it is to get yourself comfy. Now, this is more aimed at those musicians that are gigging, that have got performance coming up, or even taking an exam. You want to make sure that you are fully set up correctly and you've got no distractions. Now, what I mean by that, for example, if you've got your guitar strap that is set lower than you normally have it, it might feel strange to play. You want to make sure that your mind is fully focused on the performance and has no distractions anywhere else. So it's just something to think about if you find yourself in one of these situations. Now, I want to talk picking technique. Now, I have two main ways of teaching this. There is the toy gun method and the OK method. Now, I'm going to start with the toy gun method. And this is where we take our picking hand and we put it out in front of us like this. And what we're going to do is create a toy gun using our thumb and first finger. Just like that. You see that? Thumb, first finger. Okay? Now, what I want you to do is pull the trigger with that first finger. So you have that. Okay? Just so you can see that shape there. Now, I'm going to take my pick here, and what we're going to do, I'll just get closer in the camera so you can see this. I'm actually going to place the pick on my first finger, just like that, so you can see. So original position with the gun shape like that, and then we pull the trigger, and you can see how that's gone in there, okay? And then we just simply place our thumb down here, and then we can release our fingers here. Some people like to keep them up here, but I recommend having nice loose fingers. And also that helps with things like hybrid picking, which you might learn later on, where we use our picking, our pick and our fingers to play. Now, the second method I have is the OK method. And some people will consider this even easier to learn. So what I like to do here is create an OK symbol with our hands, just like that. And then again, we're going to take the pick, but this time we're just going to place it between our thumb and our finger, just like that. Get exactly the same results. Now, I want to also stress with our guitar, you want to be aiming between the neck pickup and the middle pickup. This is kind of the optimum position for you to be playing. And if you're hearing this sound, an extra tip here, that's a no-no, okay? We don't want to be hearing that. That means you're digging in way too deep. It's really important that if you hear that, you get used to adjusting your pick and just using the very tip, which is what it's designed to do. This will make your playing much more efficient. Now, one final tip for this as well. When you're strumming and picking, you want to be using your wrist action here, not the whole arm as one solid movement, but just so it's coming from that wrist. This is really, really important. Now, the picking technique we're going to learn here is the art of alternate picking. This is where we play a downstroke followed by an upstroke. Now, this allows us to be much more efficient and faster at playing. Now, it's really important to take note here when you're practicing this, not to dig in your pick too far down. You don't want that because it creates a lot more resistance. You want to have your pick right on the edge here, so it creates much less resistance. Now, the way I always describe this, if you're running through a field that's like boggy, waterlogged, each step you take, your feet is going to drag down and cause more resistance. Whereas if you're running on tarmac, for example, there's much less resistance, so you can run faster and more efficiently. It's exactly the same that applies to this picking technique. Now, do you ever find yourself short on time? This can make it feel really difficult to fit in practice, right? I've even found that some people almost feel guilty because they don't have the time to practice, which in turn then leads to a sense of anxiety, which of course they then associate with the guitar, and as a result, they simply give up. Well, what if I was to tell you there's a way that you can practice more by using less time? Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, I'm going to reveal my 2 secret methods and show you how to do this in just a sec. But first, I want to give you some more top tips that is going to help maximize your practice results and help you progress further on the guitar. Tip number 1 on the list is to incorporate a metronome. Now, this doesn't need to be a physical device. It could be an app on a phone, or you could even type into Google the word metronome, and hey presto, you've got a free metronome available at your fingertips. Now, this will help your rhythm skills tremendously, but even more importantly than that, it allows you to slow the song down and select a pace which is more comfortable for where you're currently at. It also allows you to set micro goals, and I think this is one of the most important things to help with one's progression. Now, let me give you an example of this. If you select a song to learn, which in this case is Thunderstruck. Now, by the way, if you would like to learn this song, the video link to this lesson is available in my description below. Now, if you click on the YouTube settings down at the bottom, you can then see that you can select on the speed settings. You'll then notice that you can customize the speed, and you'll also notice that you can increase or decrease by increments as little as 5. Now, these are the micro goals that I was talking about. Now, for every increased speed of 5 is another micro goal achieved. Now, it's that sense of achievement that feels good. And this also allows you to see the physical progression for yourself. I highly recommend using YouTube's customizable speed settings, and you can actually try this out for yourself and learn a bunch of new songs. Just head on over to my playlist where the link can be found in the description below. Now, my next tip coincides with the micro goals that we were just talking about. And it's arguably one of the most important bits of advice that I can give you. And that is to break down the song into smaller, manageable chunks. Now, this might sound completely obvious, but most people, they don't do this. They see the song as one whole thing to learn all at once. Try breaking down the song into smaller sections. Now, it might be that you need to break this down even further. Let's say there's a chord shape you're struggling with, for example. You could break it down to singular chords. And I've got a great tip for you here. Try setting a timer for 1 minute. And I want you to play that chord as many times as you can within that minute. Now, it's really important to take your hands away in between each time that you play the chord, and even more importantly, be honest. And what I mean by that is only count the times that you play that chord correctly. Now, what you'll find is over the next week or so, you will be able to play that chord so much easier and so many more times within that minute. Now, breaking down songs into smaller sections is a vital skill that I want you to keep at the forefront of your mind, because it coincides with the 2 number 1 tips I have on how to practice more by using less time. And I'm going to reveal exactly how you do that in 1 minute, I promise. But I've got one more really useful tip to help you with your practice skills, and that is to get into the habit of writing things down. Now, whether this is writing a practice schedule or simply writing down what it is you practiced and achieved in that session, these again act as micro goals. And for every one of these that is scratched off your list is another task completed. That in turn leads to a sense of achievement, and you can also see the physical progress that you have made for each one that you've scratched off right in front of your eyes. Now, it's time to reveal the first way in which I can practice more by using less time. Now, the first thing I want you to do is to get one of these, a guitar stand. And then next, we're simply gonna keep the guitar out. Now, it could be a floor stand, it could be on the wall, but what's important here is that you keep your guitar out on display. This is crucial. And when you're busy, I recommend putting the guitar in a place where you almost have to walk around it when you move. Now, this means that when you get up, you have to physically look at the guitar, and it becomes in your thought process, no matter how busy you are. Now, whether you're working away, doing homework, looking after children, there will be that moment where your brain will think something like, I need a drink, or I need to go to the toilet. Now, when this happens, you will see your guitar when you get up. And this is the moment that I want you to get used to picking your guitar up. Now, when I ask you to remember that skill of breaking down songs into smaller chunks, this is that vital element that we need to implement here. So if we're learning a chord, let's say a D chord, we pick up the guitar and we play that chord once correctly. Now, even if it takes a little bit of time, make sure you don't put it down until you've played that chord once correctly. And once you have, pop the guitar down and proceed to getting your drink. Now, we can do the same thing even if it was a section of a song. Let's say there's a riff that you want to learn that's particularly tricky. Now, we can take that one part of the riff and apply the same technique here. Play it through once, making sure to play it correctly, even if it takes some time. Then once you've done that, pop your guitar and it's off to the toilet. Now, once you return, pick it up, play it once again correctly, pop it down, and you can get on with your work. I know it doesn't seem like a lot of practice time. That's because it isn't. That's the magic of this. But it's not really detracting anything away from your work or the task at hand. You'll be so surprised at the amount of times that we need to get up throughout the day, and it's this regularity that is so important here. We need to learn the muscle memory movement in order to play the things that we want to learn. Now, I'm going to give you a really important bit of advice here, and I tell this to all of my pupils, and that is if you've only got 10 minutes to dedicate to practice per day, it is so much more beneficial to do that 5 times a week than it is, let's say, one 1-hour session per week. Now, I'm going to share with you my final method of practicing more using less time. But for this one, we've got to hop into my car. Now, I am currently traveling to a gig, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to share with you one of my very favorite practice techniques, and it allows me to also demonstrate how I used it. Now, I know you think I'm probably a bit crazy given the fact that I haven't got my guitar with me and I'm currently traveling. However, bear with me because I find this to be one of the most effective practice methods that I currently use. Now, what I like to do is I like to stick on the playlist of the tracks that I am currently playing tonight. And what I do is I visualize the guitar fretboard, and as those songs are playing, I visualize each note that I'm supposed to play on the guitar while the tracks play through. This allows me to go through things like the structure of the song, any notes that I'm sort of slightly unsure of, it helps me memorize those as well. This especially works well if you half know the song or even fully know the song, but just want that extra little bit of practice before, let's say, a performance is coming up or you're doing a gig. Now, the other good thing is you basically need no equipment to be able to do this at all. You just need the playlist of the tracks that you're listening to, and you can effectively listen to it on the bus. You can do this as a passenger in a car, on the plane, on the way to work, even waiting for an appointment. It's amazing. You can practice on the go wherever you like, and I highly recommend you give it a go. Right, let's talk guitar amplifiers and how you can set them up to get a decent tone from them. Now, whilst I understand that sound is very subjective and there's not necessarily a right or wrong way of doing this, it's based on personal preference, what I am going to do is give you the tools necessary in order to set up any guitar amplifier so you have a decent foundation to work from. So we're actually going to start with the guitar first. Now, I want to make sure your volume is all the way up to its maximum setting of 10, and the same with your tone controls. Don't worry if you only have one, just make sure it's maxed out. And then we're also going to make sure that the pickup selector is selected all the way down to the bridge position. Now, you can find on some of the more budget-friendly guitars that the bridge selection on your pickup selector can sound quite thin and weedy and very, very shrill and toppy. And when you select it on the neck pickup, equally it can have sort of no depth to it and not really that much low end. Now, we'll come back to how we can use the tone controls later to try and combat that. Same with on the amp and how we can kind of compensate for that a little bit more. Now, to demonstrate how to set up a guitar amplifier, I've actually chosen to borrow this Orange Crush 20 RT. Now, there's two main reasons for that. Firstly, This is a very simple amplifier to use, and it offers all the generic features that you'd expect from any guitar amp. And secondly, I actually happen to find this to be one of the best budget-friendly guitar amps that money can buy. And I thought it'd be really useful to demonstrate these techniques on the more budget-friendly end of the spectrum first, so you can apply them to any amp moving forward. Now we're going to take a closer look at the control panel now, and the first thing you'll notice is that all of my dials are set to 0, which is exactly what we want, and we're going to be focusing solely on the clean channel. Now your amplifier might only have a clean channel, which is great. If you have got an overdrive channel, just make sure it's on that clean channel. Now we're going to start with the clean volume up. So we need a little bit of volume, and I'm just going to play a chord for you. Now you'll notice it sounds quite flat, and that's because we haven't got any of our EQ settings dialed in. So we're going to ignore the rest of the controls now and focus solely on the bass, middle and treble settings. And we're going to actually start with the bass frequency. Now, what we're doing here is we're dealing with the low end with the bass, and we're going to be turning this dial all the way around and adjusting it. And you'll hear a point, in fact, I'll demonstrate now. If I play just the chord where it's flat, if I go all the way, you'll notice now it sounds a bit too bassy. We've gone a bit too far. So you're looking for that sweet spot where it just starts to push over the edge of getting a little bit bassy. So let's try that now. And you'll notice there that I went to where I thought the sweet spot was, dialed it back, tested it a couple of times. So that way I'm training my ear to hear where I think that sweet spot is. And for me, it's around about there. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to the treble. Now, some amplifiers are really simple. They only have a bass or treble, or sometimes it's just one tone control, which kind of does a blend of all three. Now, if your amp hasn't got that, do not worry, because the same principle applies here. So let's switch over to the treble now, and we're going to do the same thing, play that chord again. And again, just adjusted it that little bit more up and down to where I think that sweet spot is. And notice already how that's transformed the amp sound. Now, we're going to switch over to the middle now and blend in that middle feature. Same principle applies again. And that gives me a clean sound that I'm happy with. So the whole point here is trying to find a foundation that you can build upon. So next I can add in my overdrive tones now, or pedals if I've got them. So for example, here, if we were going over to our overdrive channel and we want to turn the volume up again on here. Now we'll have no sound to start with because the gain is right down, but I'm going to apply the same principle again, play a chord and twist that round. And we've got our overdrive tones there to work between. So then we can just dial in a little bit of reverb to have a little bit of flavor. I wanted to give you one extra tip here, and this one is really cool and super useful. So I'm going to switch over now to my overdrive channel, and this also works if you've got something like an overdrive pedal. And what we can actually do is use the volume dial to actually clean up the signal. Now, the reason you might want to do this, if you've got a song where the verse and chorus parts, for example, wants to be on a cleaner setting, but then you want to quickly boost that signal to get louder and more gainy for your solo, it's really effective for this. So let me give you an example of that. Here's my sound with a full, with all the settings on 10. So you can hear it's quite gainy sound. Now I might want to clean that up. So if I turn that down for a, let's say a verse part. And then if I want to boost into the solo. See, it's super effective. So it's a really cool trick, and I really recommend you experimenting with that and try incorporating this in your playing. I want you to think of your guitar sound using this following analogy. I want you to imagine and compare your sound to the most delicious meal that you could possibly imagine. Now, I know this might sound silly to start off with, but trust me here, this really works. Now, I'm going to think of a nice simple recipe. Let's say a cottage pie. So for this, we need some really good quality meat and some nice fresh potatoes. So let's imagine that the guitar amp is the meat and the guitar is the potatoes. Now these form the foundations of that meal. We can of course add into that some herbs and spices or some extra vegetables. And you combine all of these together and you can create some incredible unique flavors. However, you take away the meat and the potatoes, i.e. the guitar amp, you're left with no cottage pie, no meal, essentially no sound. You take away the herbs and spices, however, you're still left with the foundations of that meal. Now you can think of this another way. Let's take your home, for example. Think of the guitar and the guitar amp as the bricks and the mortar, and the pedals as all the furnishings around you. You take away those furnishings, you're still left with the bricks and mortar, the foundations of your home or the foundations of your sound. Whichever analogy you prefer. The point that I'm trying to make here is the guitar and the guitar amp are the most important elements of your setup. They form the foundation of your sound. Therefore, it is vital that you understand the basics of how to set up your amp so you can maximize the tone that you can achieve out of your equipment. Now, hopefully the tools that you've learned in this section will not only help you to maximize the tone you can achieve out of your own equipment, but also any amp or guitar combination that you choose to use in the future. Whenever I get asked for some advice on guitar sound, I always tell my clients to invest as much as possible in the guitar and the guitar amp first, because these form the foundation of your sound, not the pedals. Now, I know sound is incredibly subjective and there's no real right or wrong way of doing things, but hopefully the tools in this section will help you form a nice basis from which to start from. Okay, let's talk about maintaining your equipment. Now, my first tip is to never turn on your guitar amp whilst the volume is turned up and then proceed to plug in your guitar. You do this, you risk causing an explosion. In all seriousness, it's not good for the electronics or the speakers, but also it doesn't sound good or look professional. Don't do it. Sticking with guitar cables, my next tip is to never plug or unplug your guitar using the actual cable. Always use the tip sleeves at the end because that's what it's for. Now, the tip sleeve has a dual purpose. Not only does it keep what we call the jack connector securely connected to the rest of the cable, but it also allows us to plug and unplug our guitar lead safely without causing any damage to either the guitar lead or the input connection on either the guitar or the amp. Now, one of the most common causes of damage is actually the wires becoming loose from their soldering inside the input connection. Now, You also might find from time to time that the nut actually becomes loose, but don't worry if this happens, just simply tighten it back up and it should fix any problems. Now, if you follow all of these steps carefully, you should minimize the chance of causing any future problems with your connections. Now, my last tip on guitar cables is learning how to coil them properly so we can store them safely. Now, cables don't like to have tight bends in them. It can actually cause breakages in the metal wire inside. Now, I'm going to show you 2 ways in which we can coil the guitar leads so they can last longer and expand the life of the cable. Now, my preferred method of coiling up cables is to actually use this even circular technique here. Now, I actually use this 99% of the times that I'm coiling cables. And in fact, all the years of coiling up cables is proven to be very valuable around the home, because anytime I now see a cable lying around the house, I have to coil it up this way. And actually it's really good to get into the habit of that because it's extended the life of many electronic products. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to undo my cable here as we expect to find it after we've used it on the floor. So we've got real spaghetti junction. Okay, now the first thing what we have to do is we take one of the ends of the cable in one hand, and then what I'm going to do with the other hand is just slide it around all the way down here. And the aim here is just try and get all these knots and ties out, so we're getting the cable as straight as possible. Now, this may take a few attempts, especially if it's a new cable. You have to almost kind of train it, but stick with it and the cable will eventually fall into line with the shape that you're trying to manipulate it in, these circles. Now, we're going to grab the end again and we're basically going to repeat that process, but this time we're going to create a loop each time. So I'll take I've got one end here, I take the other hand and I slide it down, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a loop here. So I'm bringing my right hand to the left, but at the same time I'm twisting and turn to create a loop. Now I repeat that process again with the second loop, and you'll see here I've got a little bit of a twist, so I'm taking that out, start it again, twist, and then bring this loop up to the first loop, and then making sure we've got a nice even loop. And then we just keep repeating that process, bring it up, twist, up, around and twist until we're left with a bit of excess. Now with that excess, what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist it round the cable, in through the loop, and repeat that again. And that means we have got a nice even cable. Now you might also have noticed that I've got these little Velcro ties as well. Now you can purchase these in packs of like 100 for next to nothing, and they're just really useful, and they act as an extra bit of protection just around it. And it does mean that even if you throw the cable around, it basically maintains its structural integrity, which is great. And this means you can now hang this on a hook somewhere or pop it in a drawer and store it safely. Now the second method that I use, I only actually tend to use on really long leads when I'm in more of a rush. I don't recommend it over the first way, but providing you do this carefully and correctly, you can still achieve really good results and prolong the life of your lead. So I'm actually using an XLR mic lead here. One good thing, if you did use the coiling method with this, actually, these connections actually connect together. So when you twist it round, you don't actually need the Velcro of these because you can kind of keep them connected as well, which is a nice little tip there. So what we're going to do this way is the same thing again, where we are just trying to get rid of all of the twists and turns into the cable, quite a lot in this one. Now, once we've found the other end, what we can do here is bring them two together, and we're going to do the same thing again, this time with both sides of the leads. And you see we've got real spaghetti junction going on here. And you're just trying to get rid of all those loose knots, and the ends, this is where they always twist up, and the whole point is to get rid of those knots. Okay, now we're going to bring this end and this end together. so they're nice and even. And again, do the same thing. Try and get rid of all the twists and turns until we get the other end. And again, bring both ends together, another fold in half. So we've got our ends here. Now, when we've got to this point, and I wouldn't recommend sort of going in half again. You want quite a lot of length left. I'd say sort of this kind of arm's length, almost like you're doing a push-up, except I'm not. So now when we're here, this is the point where we can twist it, and we're going to form a very loose, not tight knot. Just a simple knot, just like that. Now, it's important that we don't pull this really tight, because that's where the damage inside can come from. But providing we keep it loose, we can keep these wrapped up like that and then store these on a hook or in a drawer. And you can actually, again, just pop a bit of Velcro around them just to keep them in place. Now, whichever method you choose to use, as long as you follow the instructions to my previous tips carefully, that should ensure that your guitar cables last a long time and your connections on your guitar and amp stay secure for longer. Now, my next tip is to never ever leave your guitar resting against or near a radiator. The temperature change can cause your guitar to go severely out of tune, but even more importantly than that, the heat can cause the wooden neck to warp and cause severe permanent damage to your guitar. Don't do it. Now, whilst I don't ever recommend you lean your guitar against a chair or a table, there are of course those moments where you need to pop it down for a second. If that's the case, always lean your guitar strings side down, because it has more friction to stay in place rather than the slippery surface of the back side of the guitar neck. I always say though, if there's nothing stopping the guitar from falling directly to the ground, it's not a good idea to lean it against that surface, because if the guitar falls to the ground, it can cause the guitar neck to snap, causing irreparable damage. Don't do it. My next tip is to always wipe down the strings after every use with a microfiber cloth. Now, you also want to apply either some lemon oil or, as I have here, some almond oil every so often. Just apply a small amount and then wipe each string with a microfiber cloth, and this will ensure that your strings stay fresher for longer. Sticking on the topic of strings, I wanted to give you a quick tip on when to change your guitar strings. Now, strings can lose their brightness, their tonal quality, and even their tuning capability quite quickly, especially if you use your guitar a lot. Now, I actually used to change my strings every 2 to 3 gigs, which when I was touring was actually every 3 to 4 days, which I know was a lot, but it's very different for someone that's, say, a beginner or someone playing at home for fun versus someone like myself that is regularly gigging and wants to achieve a consistent tone each night. Now, it's really important that you understand your situation for your needs. Now, what I mean by this is you might be one of those players that prefers the duller tone of older, more worn-in strings, or you might be one of those players that prefers a brighter tone that you get from fresher strings. And this is going to require a much more regular string change. Now, if you're one of those players that plays at home for fun, doesn't really gig, or is more of a beginner, I recommend only changing your strings every 3 months or so. And there are some indicators that we can use to know when to change the strings. So, for example, you might have intonation issues. So this is where you've got your guitar in tune and then you go to play a chord, for example, and it sounds out of tune. Or you might be finding that your guitar is going out of tune more regularly, or even that your tone on your strings is getting a lot duller. Now, these are all indicators that it's time to change your strings. Now, a lot of my beginner pupils are always incredibly surprised at how regularly you have to tune the guitar. Now, could be lots of factors for this. It might be since the last time you played your guitar, you've accidentally bashed it. It might be temperature changes. It might be the strings getting old. It might be that you've got a cheaper quality guitar, so it doesn't actually hold its tuning as well. There's loads of different factors as to why we need to regularly tune our guitars. But it's really important that you get into the habit of tuning your guitar every time you pick it up. That way it will always sound the best it can for every time that you play, practice, or perform. Now, my final tip is to completely eliminate the chance of your guitar falling off mid-performance, where your guitar strap comes loose and guitar falls on the floor. It's horrible. Now, we can do that by investing in some of these strap locks. Now, there's lots of variations of strap locks that you can get. I've got two to show you here. And the first are these metal prongs. Can you see those here? Now, you can see it's got this hook mechanism on the back, and then on the front we've got this quick release. You see how you pull that system out, and you might be able to see it in there, the little black cup pulling in and out. Now, the advantages of these is, as I say, that quick release system. So if you've got to change guitars and you need the same strap, for example, and you need to do that quickly, or a string breaks and you pull the strap off, it's very, very quick to just pull them and release it. And once those cups are in place, it's not going anywhere as well. It's very secure. Disadvantages are you have to actually use the strap buttons that these come with. So you actually have to take the strap buttons off the guitar that you've got and put these ones on. It's very easy to do, but you just literally unscrewing and then screwing these ones back in. But it's just something to know. And they are quite pricey. They are, I believe, between 20 and 30 pounds, I think. I haven't bought them for a while, so I have to double check that. But yeah, they're quite pricey anyway. But I have a cheap alternative that works just as well. And they are these rubber rings. Now, these, in comparison, are pennies. And you can actually buy a pack of, I don't know, 10 or 20 for a few pounds. And they're very easy to use. They use your existing strap buttons on your guitar. So you just put your guitar strap on as normal and then put these over your strap button. And that means that your strap button is over the top of this and your strap is here. So your strap being pulled off is essentially, it's got to have a hole the size of the ring, which is not going to happen. Disadvantage of that is if you do need to change your strap, they can be quite tricky to get on because it's hard rubber, but the advantage is they are very cheap and very secure. So I really recommend that you get some strap locks in your life and avoid the possibility of ever having that humiliation of your guitar falling off on a performance again. Now, at the very start, I promised if you stick around to the end of the video, I was going to give you an extra tip, and this is all about maintaining a good attitude. Don't be a noodler. Now, what I mean by this is don't be that person that is noodling away while someone is trying to talk to you. This might be your teacher explaining something to you. It might be the drummer in your band. It might even be the producer in the studio. Don't be that person that is noodling away. It's rude, it's disrespectful, and no one enjoys it. There's a time and a place for noodling, and these situations are not them. Put it this way, there might be 10 guitarists all going for the same session job or tour that you're wanting. There might even be as good a player as you, if not better. But if you can prove that you can not only play the songs really well, but stand out by being easy to work with, maintaining a very professional attitude and fun to go on tour with, you're much more likely to get the job. Noodling in front of people. Don't do it. Now, expanding on this a little further, if you've got any extra skills, let's say you can sing backing vocals, for example, I urge you to pursue these on the sidelines. Now, this could be the deciding factor one day. Let's say you're going for a tour and it's whittled down to just 2 guitarists, yourself and someone else. You can both play the parts brilliantly, you both have good attitudes, but they might need some extra backing vocals. And then all of a sudden you can offer something that that other person can't offer. So it might be the deciding factor in offering you that job. Also, simple things like tuning and recognizing when your guitar is out of tune and getting used to keeping your guitar in tune. Learning to trust your ears and know that if something sounds wrong, it probably is wrong. So learning to trust your ears and keeping in tune is a vital part of the ethos of maintaining a professional working attitude within the music industry. Now, if you're playing out of tune in rehearsals, people are going to notice, and inevitably you're going to end up getting dropped. So it's so important that you get used to these basic skills early on and maintain them in a professional working manner to get hired in the music industry. Now, I know that was a little bit of a long one, but I really hope you guys have enjoyed that and got lots of really useful tips on how to get good on guitar. And if this video has given you some value, please remember to smash that like button and hit the subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, let me know in the comments down below which tips were your favorite and which ones have really helped you to progress further. If you want to show that extra bit of support, you can always buy me a coffee using the link in the description below. But thanks again for tuning in. And as ever, you've been watching The Music Halls. I'm KH. Until next time, keep on rocking.